Hello and welcome to News Central Television. I am Lekon Obanjo. Here are some stories making rounds beyond the continent. The U.S. stock market opened lower on Friday following declines in Europe and Asia after President Donald Trump announced new tariffs affecting over 90 countries. Trump raised tariffs on Canadian goods from 25 to 35%, citing concerns over fentanyl imports. Though most Canadian products remain exempt under the USMCA agreement, tariffs on Mexico have been paused for 90 more days, while Brazil faces a hefty 50% levy soon. Markets reacted with uncertainty. European stocks hit a 3-week low, and Asian markets are set for their worst week since April. Futures for Nasdaq and S&P 500 also dropped about 1%. These tariffs aim to protect U.S. industries, but have stirred global trade tensions and ongoing negotiations. Well, joining us on the news to discuss this is a political affairs analyst from Bellcrest Institute, Joy John, and she joins me from Washington, D.C. Joy, thank you so much for joining us on the news.
Thanks for having me.
So we see that President Trump's decision to impose new tariffs on over 90 countries is generating a lot of responses. But then how significant is this move in the broader context of global trade policy?
Well, that's a great question. I think that what is driving this is a sense that the U.S. wants to reassert control over trade rules that it feels no longer serve its interest. But the scale of this move, touching over 90 countries, sends a pretty strong signal. I think it shifts the tone globally. Instead of quiet negotiations behind closed doors, we are seeing more public and forceful ways of certain terms of coming to alignment. And you know, I think from there, we'll see more countries adjusting, not necessarily reacting to this new posture.
And now let's talk about some adjustments. Now, despite Prime Minister Mark Carney's disappointments, most Canadian goods remain exempt. How will this partial exemption affect Canada's economy and its trade relationship with the U.S.?
Absolutely, yes. You see, and here's the thing here. Canada may seem to have avoided the hit, or the direct hit right now, which is important. But the exemption does not eliminate uncertainty. It does not eliminate uncertainty. What it does is it just delays it. You know, for Canada, I think it creates a bit of a tension. The relationship with the U.S. remains strong on paper, but the trade is now a space where even close allies need to stay on their toes. So while the impact today is minimal, I think the political undertones are much harder to ignore, much harder.
Yeah, we understand. Now, with tariffs on Mexico delayed and Brazil facing a steep 50% levy, what message do you think the U.S. is trying to send to its trade partners, and how do you think these countries will respond?
You know, that contrast is very hard to ignore, I tell you. Delaying action to Mexico suggests that there's still, you know, a conversation happening behind closed doors, or at least room for one to take place. But Brazil's 50% hits, look, for Brazil, it sends a very strong signal. It's a different message altogether. What it does tell is that Washington is willing to act unilaterally and sharply. That's very clear. 50% is straight, is I think one of the highest, if not the highest. Most countries now will be reaching out through diplomatic channels, not to challenge it outrightly, but to understand, you know, and negotiate what can be done to avoid further escalation, using what happened with Brazil as a point in reference.
Now, Joy, given the wide geographic scope of these tariffs, which sectors or probably industries are likely to feel the impact the most? And how might global supply disruptions, or chains rather, be affected?
So right off the bat, industries that rely on you know, parts from multiple countries, for instance, electronics, automobiles, and even consumer goods like furniture, will feel this impact first. We have, when you put in a tariff or a tariff is applied, it ultimately increases cost. But more than that, it also disrupts planning. So if I plan to spend a certain amount on goods from a particular country, I have to go back to the drawing board. It's going to disrupt planning. Companies have to make quick decisions. Do they absorb the cost? Do they pass it on? Do they switch suppliers? Those are talks that are going to be on the table moving onwards. So I think we are likely to see short-term disruptions expected and longer-term repositioning as businesses adjust to this new tariffs.
I wonder how this would affect European countries. I mean, what are the likely short and long-term effects of these tariffs, most especially on the UK, especially given the country had time to negotiate terms during the postponement period?
Yes, for the UK did manage, like you rightly stated here, to use the postponement window to reduce initial effect or blow, however you want to look at it. But long term, I think the question is, how consistent is the United States going to be as a trade partner? That is the main question on the table. The uncertainty makes it harder for the UK to plan. And for post-Brexit Britain at this point, trying to build reliable partnerships, I think this adds a layer of complexity. And so we'll have to take it as we see it. So yes, it may seem that there's some breathing room now for the UK, but I don't think there's a lot of clarity going forward. It's still hazy.
Yeah. Now, in the light of the upcoming U.S. election, how much are these tariffs going to be used, so to speak, for political tool? Because that seems to be some sort of a global perception, most especially as they view President Trump's leadership.
Indeed. Well, I tell you, it's very hard to separate politics from policy in this moment. And for trade resonates with voters. When they head out to the polls, the voters here are very informed. So we're looking at everything. We're looking at how the policies impact our daily lives, especially in places where manufacturing or agriculture have taken a hit. There's certain parts of the United States that are known for agriculture, are known for manufacturing, for instance, like Michigan is known, of course, for the assembly vehicles there. This move may play well politically for them, but particularly voters who see it as standing up for American industries. A lot of people who support President Trump, for the most part, his supporters believe that his actions are helping the United States. They believe that his actions are helping the industries grow. That may not be the case on the other side of the aisle. Internationally, there's some hesitation because people want to understand why it's being done, and allies are watching. Canada used to be an ally up until Trump, the first Trump presidency, was one of the closest allies for the United States. But overall, allies will be watching closely whether this becomes a trend or remains a one-off. But in the end, I think it reinforces the image of the president willing to take a bold stance on the global stage. How it will play out, it's hard to tell. Everything is hazy at the moment. We can just see what happened with Russia moments ago. He's declared a subtle announcement towards Russia. We've deployed military ships there. We don't know who our allies are and who the enemies are. So we'll just watch how it plays out on the international stage. Every day, everything new. There's something you should talk about.
Well, I tell you, in all of this, one would just hope these would not have some sort of long-term adverse effects on US's diplomatic and trade relations with other countries. Thank you so much, Joy John, for sharing your thoughts with us on the news.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. We take you to Southern America to tell you that protesters rallied outside the U.S. consulate in São Paulo, Brazil, to voice their opposition to President Donald Trump's newly imposed tariffs on Brazilian goods. The demonstration highlights growing anger over the 50% tariff levy affecting many Brazilian exports. Brazil's government has strongly condemned the tariffs, calling them an unjust attack on the country's economic sovereignty. Officials have vowed to fight back using diplomatic efforts and legal challenges at international trade forums. Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva described the measures as unacceptable, emphasizing Brazil's commitment to defending its industries and workers. These protests reflect broader tensions in U.S.-Brazil trade relations under the new U.S. tariff regime amid ongoing talks to resolve escalating trade disputes. In the meantime, Brazilian Finance Minister Fernando Haddad has rejected claims that the government backtracked on retaliatory measures against the recent steep U.S. tariff hike. Haddad said no decision had ever been made to impose reciprocal tariffs on American goods. He described the U.S. imposed 50% duty on Brazilian imports as unjustifiable and outside normal trade relations. Instead, Brazil will defend its interests through legal and diplomatic channels, as the government plans targeted support measures for companies affected by the tariffs. Haddad advised caution against tit-for-tat retaliation that could harm Brazilian consumers, emphasizing strategic responses over immediate tariffs. The U.S. tariffs, set to take effect on August 6, have escalated tensions between Brazil, which remains focused on measured lawful resistance.
As medidas são já é que não houve desistência da decisão, porque essa decisão nunca foi tomada. Nós nunca usamos esse verbo para caracterizar as ações que o governo brasileiro vai tomar. São ações de proteção da soberania, proteção da nossa indústria, né, do nosso agronegócio, da nossa agricultura. Então são medidas de reação a uma ação, na nossa opinião, injustificável, de proteção da economia brasileira e da soberania brasileira. Nós entendemos que há canais competentes onde o Brasil pode defender os seus interesses, na OMC, na Justiça Americana, onde vários empresários, tanto dos Estados Unidos quanto do Brasil, estão recorrendo para salvaguardar os seus interesses e os contratos que foram estabelecidos, e sim buscar os canais diplomáticos competentes para atenuar o efeito da decisão sobre a economia brasileira. A tarifa de 50% é realmente uma coisa injustificável, fora do padrão de relacionamento dos Estados Unidos com qualquer outro país.
Still on U.S. tariffs, Thailand and Cambodia on Friday welcomed a 19% trade tariff announced by U.S. President Donald Trump, avoiding a threatened levy of 36% days after intervened to help broker a ceasefire in their deadly border conflict. Cambodia said it would drop all tariffs on imports from the United States and order up to 20 Boeing 737s for its national airline in a further effort to woo the Trump administration. Meanwhile, Cambodian government workers say they are happy with the 19% trade tariff. Away from that to police amnesty, Peru's President Dina Boluarte has dismissed an international court order to suspend a new law granting amnesty to police, military and state agents accused of human rights violations during the country's violent internal conflict from 1980 to 2000. The law, passed by Congress and awaiting Boluarte's signature, provides amnesty mainly to uniformed personnel over 70 years old accused or convicted of crimes during counterinsurgency operations against the Shining Path and Tupac Amaru guerrillas. Human rights groups warn the law obstructs justice for victims of atrocities and breaches Peru's obligations under international law. Despite international criticism, Boluarte has yet to comment publicly on the legislation's implications, asserting national sovereignty over the court's directive.
Claro, no somos colonia de nadie y no permitiremos la intervención de la Corte Interamericana que pretende suspender un proyecto de ley que busca justicia para miembros de nuestras Fuerzas Armadas, nuestra Policía Nacional y los comités de autodefensa que lucharon arriesgando su vida contra la insanía del terrorismo contra patriotas. No lo vamos a permitir. Somos defensores de los derechos humanos, de los ciudadanos, y esta posición del gobierno es soberana, autónoma, libre y justa para un país que anhela paz.
Let's now go on a break on Beyond the Continent. When we return, millions denied a car finance compensation after UK Supreme Court ruling. We'll tell you more in a short while. Don't go away. Many thanks for being there. We talk security deal now. The United States and Ecuador have signed a new security agreement aimed at deepening cooperation on border control, drug trafficking and migration. The deal was signed in Quito during a visit by U.S. Homeland Security Secretary Christian Noem. It comes amid a major drop in Ecuadorian migration to the U.S. from over 272,000 in 2024 to just 3,400 this year, following new immigration policies under President Donald Trump, who will return to office in January. Both countries say the agreement is part of a broader push to strengthen law enforcement ties and regional stability. Noem called it a dramatic improvement, praising the partnership as key to upholding the law and securing borders on both sides. In Central America, El Salvador's lawmakers adopted a constitution reform to abolish presidential term limits and allow current President Nayib Bukele to run indefinitely. This move allows re-election, extends the term of office from 5 to 6 years. It also shortens the current presidential term by 2 years from 2029, with general elections due to happen in March 2027. This reform was adopted by Bukele's 57 supporters in the Legislative Assembly and voted against by only 3 opposition members. One of the opposition member, Marcela Villatoro, during the parliamentary session, stated that democracy has died in El Salvador. The 44-year-old has been president since 2019. He was re-elected in 2024 with a majority after a Supreme Court ruling allowed him to bypass a constitutional ban on successive terms. We take you to Europe to tell you that the UK Supreme Court has ruled that lenders are not required to pay compensation to millions of motorists over car finance loans. The court sided with finance companies in 2 of 3 test cases concerning commission payments made by banks and credit providers to car dealers. These cases question whether dealers owed a duty to act in the best interests of car buyers when selling vehicles on finance. The ruling significantly limits the scope for large-scale compensation claims from motorists who bought cars on finance before 2021. The Treasury acknowledged the issues raised by the court case and said it is collaborating with regulators and industry stakeholders to assess the impact on both firms and consumers. Now we tell you about prison sentence. Bosnian Serb leader Milorad Dodik has rejected a recent decision by a Bosnian appeals court that upheld his prison sentence, deepening the crisis in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Dodik declared that he does not accept the verdict and called on the Republika Srpska entity to respond firmly to what he described as an unjust ruling. The court's decision marks a significant moment of legal and political tension in the region, risking increased instability in the ethnically divided country. Dodik's stance has alarmed both domestic and international observers who fear that the dispute could escalate into broader conflict, highlighting the fragile state of peace and governance in Bosnia's complex power-sharing system.
Ja ću prihvatiti svaku odluku parlamenta, a ne prihvatam ovu odluku, bez obzira što znam da iza toga stoji i kreira ovu odluku kreirala Europska unija, predvođena. Ja ću nastaviti da obavljam svoje poslove, bez obzira na njihove dalje stvari, sve dotle dok ne dobijem odluku Narodne skupštine i organa.
Now, Russian President Vladimir Putin has downplayed former U.S. President Donald Trump's demand for a ceasefire by August 8, saying all disappointments come from excessive expectations. Speaking to journalists at a recent press point, Putin emphasized the importance of a calm, thorough conversation behind closed doors to address the ongoing conflict. He described initial signs from Kyiv as positive, suggesting some willingness on Ukraine's part to engage in talks. However, Putin's comments signal caution about setting firm deadlines amid the complex and volatile situation. The international community watches closely as tensions remain high, hoping diplomatic efforts will yield peaceful progress in the near future.
Это положительный момент. Что касается каких-то разочарований со стороны кого бы то ни было, то все разочарования, они возникают от избыточных ожиданий. Это известное общее правило. Но для того, чтобы подойти к решению вопроса мирным путем, нужно вести обстоятельные разговоры. И не на публике, а это...
In the meantime, Ukrainian emergency workers have completed search and rescue operations following one of the deadliest missile attacks on Kyiv this year, which has left 31 people dead, including 5 children. Among the victims is a 2-year-old child found early on Friday in the rubble of a heavily damaged apartment building in the Sviatoshinsky district. The youngest victims were commemorated by Irina Drodz, a 28-year-old mother of 3 who laid flowers in their memory. Rescue teams worked tirelessly through mountains of debris to locate survivors and rescue bodies. Over 150 people were injured in the attack, which struck multiple residential areas and critical infrastructure. Kyiv has declared a day of mourning with flags at half-masts and public events cancelled.
Померли діти. Тому ми принесли квіти, бо в нас є діти. Наші діти живуть через будинок від цього. І сьогодні вмерли вони, а могли померти наші діти. Їм просто потрібно зробити зле і все. Їм просто потрібно вбити Україну, вбити нашу націю. Більше їм нічого.
And that's all on Beyond the Continent. Do remember that you can send your eyewitness reports to the WhatsApp number on your screen. And you can equally follow us on social media. We are at News Central TV. Watch us live on the various channels: DSTV 422, GoTV 23, StarTimes 274, Arvo TV, and YouTube. Many thanks for watching. I am Lekon Onobanjo.